A special thank you to each of our subscribers who make this channel possible. Here's today's story. In a significant legal showdown, California Governor Gavin Newsom has secured a temporary restraining order, TRO, against President Donald Trump's deployment of the California National Guard in response to protests in Los Angeles. This ruling, issued by U.S. District Judge Charles Breyer, highlights the ongoing tensions between state and federal authority, particularly in the context of constitutional rights and the rule of law. The judge's decision came after Newsom argued that Trump's unilateral action was illegal and unconstitutional, a sentiment echoed by many legal experts who have scrutinized the president's interpretation of his powers. The TRO effectively bars the Trump administration from deploying members of the California National Guard and mandates the return of control to Governor Newsom. However, the order is currently on hold due to a stay imposed by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit, leaving the legal battle open for further scrutiny. Judge Breyer's ruling emphasizes that Trump did not follow the mandated congressional procedures necessary for such a deployment, stating, his actions were illegal, both exceeding the scope of his statutory authority and violating the 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution. The judge's reasoning suggests a pattern of overreach by the Trump administration, which has often been accused of bypassing established legal frameworks in favor of unilateral action. The controversy erupted following a memo from Trump directing Secretary of State Pete Hegseth to deploy 2,000 National Guard members, a number that was later increased to 4,000. Citing the need to respond to protests against Immigration and Customs Enforcement (ICE) raids, Trump asserted that the protests constituted a rebellion against the authority of the federal government, invoking a provision of U.S. law that allows for the deployment of National Guard forces under specific circumstances, including rebellion or the inability to execute federal laws. However, Judge Breyer challenged this interpretation, noting that the definition of rebellion must align with its ordinary meaning at the time the statute was enacted. He pointed out that while the government referred to violent protests, the majority of demonstrators were peaceful. The judge highlighted that the protests were primarily focused on a single issue, the immigration raids, rather than a broader attempt to overthrow the government. Breyer's analysis further scrutinized the government's claim that federal law enforcement was unable to execute the laws due to the protests. He deemed their arguments as conjecture without substantial evidence, stating, the statute does not allow for the federalizing of the National Guard when the president faces obstacles that cause him to underperform in executing the laws. The ruling also addressed the procedural shortcomings of the deployment, noting that the law requires orders to be issued through state governors. Newsom's complaint indicated that federal officials did not consult him prior to the deployment, undermining the state's authority over its National Guard. In a broader context, this case underscores the delicate balance of power between state and federal governments, particularly in matters of law enforcement and public safety. Judge Breyer affirmed that the police power is a fundamental right reserved to the states by the 10th Amendment, stating, it is not the federal government's place in our constitutional system to take over a state's police power whenever it is dissatisfied with how vigorously or quickly the state is enforcing its own laws. As this legal battle unfolds, it raises critical questions about the limits of presidential power and the importance of adhering to constitutional principles. The implications of this case could resonate beyond California, potentially influencing how future administrations approach state-federal relations in the deployment of National Guard forces in response to civil unrest. In conclusion, the temporary restraining order serves as a reminder of the ongoing tensions in American governance and the necessity of upholding the rule of law. As the situation develops, all eyes will be on the Ninth Circuit Court as it deliberates on the merits of the arguments presented by both sides. A decision that could have far-reaching consequences for the relationship between state and federal authority in the United States. That's all for this story. We upload videos every day covering many different subjects, so hit that subscribe button to stay informed. Thanks for watching.